This is the Storypunks podcast, the show where we talk about all the punks, so steampunk, dieselpunk, cyberpunk, and all the other punks. Today we're talking about Ecopunk, and it feels so good to be saying this introduction and to offer this first interview of season 2. I have had a lot happening over the break, and I will touch on that over the next few episodes because there's just so much to share. It's been about 5 months, actually. In my intro to the season, I said 4. And then I got to thinking and I was like, no, it's been longer than that. So a lot to share. But today I'm talking with Jesikah Sundin. She is this amazing Ecopunk goddess. I really should just say author. But as I've spoken with her and I've gotten to know how much she knows about all these different punks, I've decided that maybe a more elevated title is appropriate. You can choose whatever title you want, Jesikah, but I was so thrilled, and we had such an in-depth discussion that this will be a 2-parter. Now, in season 2, I'm changing things. I had feedback from you that you found it a little tedious to have to wait a week, or actually we were on a bi-weekly schedule last year, so you were waiting sometimes 2 weeks for the exciting conclusion of a 2-part interview. I totally get that. So I've done what it takes to be ahead of the game, and I'm offering any double session on the same week, but it does help me produce it to be able to break it into 2 sessions. So we have something just like that this week, so you could experience this new version of a 2-part special on the Storypunks podcast. And I am really thrilled to share both of these sessions with you. In episode 31, so this session, we're going to be talking about Ecopunk, Mannerpunk, and Cyberpunk. And that's because Jesikah writes in all these genres, and it's such a cool synthesis of different styles and different versions of storytelling and all the things we nerd out about on this podcast. And then you'll also see in your feed episode 32. So that is medieval, mythological, and pagan tie-ins to the punks. So fascinating, right? And I'm so excited to share it with you. I am partnering with opulentmobility.com to talk about assistive technology that has a punk style. So as many of you know, if you've listened to last season, I had this run-in with some knee problems. And it gave me just the smallest window into what people deal with on an assistive technology level. So I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't, crutches weren't working for me because I had a back issue from a previous injury. And I just found that when I was in the wheelchair, it created mobility for me, and it really bothered a lot of people in my life. It was a trigger for them. They saw me in the wheelchair and thought that I was being either dramatic or wanting to lose my independence, or so many other reactions that honestly surprised me. I don't feel like I've had that reaction when I've seen people in a wheelchair, but I can also understand how it triggers something for people. People don't want to see this symbol of supposedly losing your independence. But this experience really taught me that no, I saw it as a way to be mobile. To me, it was super empowering. And of course, it's always a little difficult to switch modes, and not to minimize anybody's experience with any issue they've had. But I was encouraged that if something ever happens where I'm more permanently needing mobility assistance, there are ways to make it really pretty good. And I was really excited to see what Opulent Mobility has done. I wish I had seen these cool wheelchair designs that are all punked out, and walker designs, and so many cool things. The jazzy Peacock scooter in particular. If you know, I write about a character called Peacock Levine. And so, yeah, this is very resonant with me. So I've teamed up with them, and I wanted to share an initiative that they have going where all you makers out there can get involved with this amazing mission. Opulent Mobility is for wheelchair and walker users. It's also for people who don't see or hear well. It's for people using prosthetic limbs, crutches, canes, and hearing aids. It's for all of us who could use a little help and want that help to have style. And that's what I absolutely resonated with when I saw Opulent Mobility. By the way, I discovered them on Etsy, so you can buy Opulent Mobility's designs today. But there's also this wonderful way that you can get involved. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. This is called the Opulent Mobility Project. And this is a groundbreaking collaborative effort to reimagine all the things we just talked about. So you can submit your artwork that reimagines disability to the Opulent Mobility 2019 exhibit. This is so cool. You can submit until June 30th, 2019 at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And there are a few other ways you can get involved if that doesn't sound right to you, but I know there's tons of makers out there, and I would love if you would submit your designs. Just go for it. And you'll be really inspired as you visit the website and you see these amazing ways that people are finding style in adaptive technology. So the other way you can get involved is to invite Opulent Mobility over. So you could, if you're involved in curation or exhibits, you could actually have Lara Brody come share the work and all that good stuff. You could also get together to reimagine mobility. So you could have your own workshop or your own situation where you bring in old walkers, crutches, wrist braces, and wheelchairs. And I know I've been to museums where I see the cool retro wheelchairs and stuff. That stuff is all over the place. So you may know of some things like that in your area, and you could find a way to use it as a discussion point for the public. And so in that way, you could build your own opulent mobility exhibit. And so this can be a touch point for how to do that and what opulent mobility has done. It's just such a cool, collaborative and integrative approach to solving some of these problems and doing it with style. So please go check out opulentmobility.com and you will see that Get Involved tab where you can check out how to submit your designs. So you'll hear a little bit more about this. This is a double episode, so I'll tell you a few more details as we go on, but just over the moon to be partnering with Opulent Mobility. And with that, I'll wrap it up because definitely want to get into this really, really amazing discussion. I walked away with so many cool things to think about, and I know you will too. Here we go. Jesikah Sundin is a multi-award-winning ecopunk sci-fi and forest fantasy writer, mom of 3 nerdlets, and devoted wife to a gamer geek. Very cool. In addition to her family, she shares her home in Monroe, Washington, with a red-footed tortoise and a collection of seatbelt purses. She is addicted to coffee, laughing, and Dr. Martens shoes. I always want to say Doc Martens shoes. Oh, and the forest is her happy place. So welcome onto the show, Jesikah.
I'm
so glad to have you here. I've got you on the screen here, Jesikah. You have the most beautiful background. You are writing in the forest, pretty much.
Yes.
So tell me more about this background. Is it a painting? Is it wallpaper? How did you...
Actually, a curtain in my master bedroom.
That's a curtain?
It is a curtain.
Oh, wow. It's really smooth and gorgeous. It just looks absolutely wonderful.
Yep. I needed it for my room.
Yes. Jesikah, is there anything else you want to share with us there in your office or that inspires you or anything like that?
Well, in my office, probably... Well, I'm not really in my office, so...
Okay, where are you?
I'm actually in my bedroom.
Oh, okay. You probably said that and I didn't catch it, but...
Yeah, no, I'm in my bedroom because I have kid stuff everywhere else. So this is my happy place.
Totally. So do you end up writing in your bedroom a lot, or do you write in your office space, or where do you create?
I'm either at the kitchen table or I'm in my bedroom.
That sounds pretty normal for what I hear from a lot of authors, so.
Yes. I wish I had an office. That would be lovely.
Yeah, it's the dream. And I think a lot of us are like multi-using the same space for many different things.
Mm-hmm.
And your bio raises so many questions. I mean, to the audience, could she be any more fascinating, right? But do you have Doc Martens on right now?
I don't.
That's okay.
I should have put Doc Martens on. Like
Doc Martens slippers or something?
No, I almost put on my Doc Marten Mary Janes. They're velvet Mary Janes.
Oh, so cool.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, also, tell us about this red tortoise.
Oh, yes. Her name is Tortolina. We got her 5 years ago from a reptile zoo just down the road from us. And so we've had her since she was about 4 weeks old after hatching. And she's a doll. We love her.
Oh, my goodness. So how big is Tortolina?
Tortolina is probably about 7 inches long right now. She will
Okay.
get to, I always feel sad saying this, but dinner plate size. Not that we will eat her,
Yeah.
but that is her, it's a good visual, dinner plate size. So we are in the process of going to be building a tortoise enclosure for her
Oh,
pretty
cool.
so she can live outside and enjoy a little internal garden of her own.
Well, very cool. It sounds like a wonderful muse for everything you've got going on when it comes to Ecopunk. So let's talk about the term itself. That's where I like to start out all these
Sure.
conversations. And it kind of builds this ongoing conversation about how different creators define the terms. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have really definite boundaries of what it means, what's included, what shouldn't be included, or where
Mm-hmm.
it goes too far. Do you have a notion of that, or what's your definition that you work from?
Yeah, I sort of do. Um, for me, there's a lot of eco-fiction out there, and especially in sci-fi, there's a little bit in fantasy, but for me, the defining point of what makes it eco-punk versus just eco-fiction and sci-fi is the focus on the punk aspect of it. The idea that going back to nature, that going off grid, that connecting with your roots as a human being in nature is so incredibly counterculture that it's rebellious, it's radical, it's, creates that kind of like how punk music is, where it kind of creates that irritation, that agitation, and you kind of want that in your eco-punk novels. You don't want it to be this like beautiful utopia. You want that agitation there so you could see what an upstream battle it is to get back to nature, to live in that place. And that is within the realm of cyberpunk, because ecopunk is a derivative of cyberpunk. So, near future, far future, so long as it's like that post-industrial world.
Oh, so cool. Well, I love that you connected it back to cyberpunk because you're right, that's where it all started.
Mhm.
And longtime listeners of the show know that. But for anyone who hasn't dove into season 1 of this podcast, just know you can go look for the Bruce Bethke episode. He's the one that coined the term cyberpunk, and we talk about it there. So a lot of people don't
Fun.
know that these are all derivatives of that. And I love that you talked about how there's this ebbing away from, or maybe huge leaps away from going into nature and being natural, and how there's this tension. I think that is the essential core of the genre as well. So that was a good observation.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about the environmental side of your life and your writing, and why this pull is really clear for you. And were there any clarifying moments that specifically stand out, or was it much more general and gradual and continual?
Well, I think I went to school for science. I spent most of my high school doing environmental science. I was one of the student leads for the GLOBE program in the early 90s, which is Global Learning Observations to Benefit the Environment. It was a scholastic program that was set up by Al Gore, and with the idea that students can collect data and track climate change.
I don't think my
And,
school had that. Sorry,
yeah.
my high school, if you did, but I don't remember hearing about that.
Well, we're kind of in the sticks here in Monroe, and somehow we had it, and I'm so grateful because that was really my heart. And so I ended up going to college for geophysics, and with the idea that I would do technical writing, I wanted to work for NOAA, so the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I wanted to write the research papers for the lab and field scientists, and kind of put all the data together and kind of see the big picture afterward. And I didn't I didn't end up finishing that, nor did I ever work for NOAA, but I did eventually become a science fiction writer. So I'm still able to take that love and that education and infuse it into something that is meaningful for me. But
So
additionally, I live in the forest. Where I live is I live in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains in Washington State, and it's like a fairy glen. It's just fairy forest everywhere, lots of moss hanging down. We also have in Washington State one of the only temperate rainforests, so you can go there, and it's just gorgeous, beautiful. And so for me, just being in that, I think about what would happen if this was all gone. What would happen if my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren didn't have this anymore? And so I try to infuse those tales into my works because I think we need to preserve, we're still animal. We want to become machine, but we're still animal. We need this other side. So, so Yeah, that's where I come from with all of it.
Oh, I love that. The older I get, when I was younger, there was definitely a time where it really repulsed me to think about living in a rural area. I just thought, what would be the point of that? Like, that would be so boring. But the older I get, the more I'm thinking, yeah, that's looking pretty good.
Yep.
And source of endless inspiration for you. So that's very, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't jumped in with your series yet, again,
Sure.
this is very popular, so all the eco-punks out there you probably already know, but will you just give an overview? Because again, we have punks from many different subgenres listening to the show.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Well, I think before I jump into kind of my elevator pitch of this series, the Biodome Chronicles is kind of a combination of Ecopunk, hopepunk with a little bit of Mannerpunk throw in there.
oh,
So,
okay, let's
yeah.
talk about all those terms then. I'm glad
Yeah.
you stopped me there. So how would you define the other terms? Like, what have they meant for you?
Sure. So hopepunk is a dystopia that the purpose of it is not to focus on the suffering of humanity, but to focus on the rebuilding of humanity using hope and moving out of that place into something that's more positive. Not necessarily a utopia. Again, we don't have to swing to an extreme, but that the people at the end, they could still be in their same situation, but it's the idea that they have had an inner growth, that there has been some kind of change that has allowed them to have hope in the midst of suffering. So they don't feel the suffering as much, or they have found solutions that ease the suffering. And it's not radical as much as a lot of other dystopian. It's not necessarily take down the government. It could be something as simple as a permaculture garden. It could be something as simple as people getting off the net and actually forming face-to-face communities, physical communities, and the life that comes out of that.
Okay, that makes me excited. I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but that makes me excited for the ramifications with Mannerpunk, which can tend to be more parlor in its sphere, or, just a
Yes.
smaller sphere. But I also wanted to say, I've never heard that delineation where Hope Punk could sit right in the middle of the two extremes of dystopian and utopian. And I think that's a really good distinction. So
Yeah.
we're learning a lot from you. Thank you. Okay, carry on, Mannerpunk.
So Mannerpunk to me is the idea that manners are, again, this radical idea that by having whatever those manners are defined in that story. Generally, we think of manners as being more Jane Austen-esque, but it could be chivalry. It can be any kind of list of traditions or rituals or manners that make that group of people or that individual counterculture.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, this is really exciting that you've written something that's Mannerpunk that is not Jane Austen.
Nope,
Time
it's
period.
not Jane Austen. Nope.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, Jane Austen time period, that's the very early 19th century. And sometimes we see Mannerpunk, and sometimes we hear the term fantasy of manners, and it's a little earlier or a lot earlier than even the Jane Austen time period. But as you've talked about solarpunk and ecopunk, well, actually, you haven't talked about solarpunk, but
I
ecopunk,
could.
yeah, but let's get to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But ecopunk tends to be later, right?
Ecopunk to me is later, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Solarpunk feels more the technology hasn't moved past solar energy,
Very, very
which is
cool.
hence the solar punk. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the punk tech aspect of it, is that everything is very solar based. But ecopunk can still have that Burning Man feel to it that solar punk does. A bunch of hippies out, in their garden being crazy in this machine world.
Okay, so can I ask you, keep going, and then I've got
Yeah.
a personal question to ask you.
Yeah, so I think the difference between that and solar punk is that like I said, they're using the solar energy to power their homes, their communities, their all those things. But ecopunk looks at a broader, form of green tech. And a lot of times it looks into carbon scrubbing, like and natural gas, like taking methane from gardens and taking that and turning it into natural gas to power something. So because compost piles are full of it.
Yeah, totally. I've been really interested in, and I think this would fit in with ecopunk. I know it would. I don't know why I said it that way, but salt. I've been researching salt reactors as an
Yes.
energy source. and just things like that that we don't see a lot, but companies are investing in these things now. So
Yeah, they are.
would you say that it's like, you know how cyberpunk is pretty much like near future, or for a lot of people it is?
Mm-hmm.
Or would you say it can go off into perpetuity? What has it been for you?
Well, I think that for cyberpunk, it could be alt history, it can be near future, it could be far future. I think that near future makes the most sense because the point of cyberpunk, from my understanding, was that it was supposed to look at this like postmodern idea of man and how they live with machines and if those machines take over and how man battles that. And it's kind of hard to project what that will look like in the far future. But we have an idea of what it might be in the near future because we're already living with it in some
Yeah.
capacity. So we
Would
could
you
take
do you
those emotions and push them forward a few years and examine it.
Absolutely. Would you apply that same reasoning to like ecopunk, solarpunk?
I would definitely apply it to Ecopunk. I think Solarpunk to me has a little bit more of a fantasy feel to it at times. A lot of people use Solarpunk as a way to explore fantasy in science fiction, so do the science fantasy mix. But I think that Ecopunk works beautifully that way as well. There's ways to do that too. Um, but Ecopunk to me is definitely more near future. It's this idea that either climate has changed or we've had some kind of apocalyptic, issue with toxins, or there's just we've removed our parks and put in factories and things like that. So Ecopunk is looking at more of the near future.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. And that's what I tend to think of. But
Mm-hmm.
again, this is an ongoing conversation. So for those listening, if you know of some other thing, this is where I just want to mention, in case anyone hasn't connected to the resource that this community has on storypunks.world, that's our website, you can actually join our Facebook forum and reading room. It's called the Storypunk Salon. So I'll pose questions about what we're talking about today. You can contribute if you have additional ideas or want, if you have questions or whatever. So thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah.
So let's get back to your series, though. For anyone who hasn't jumped in, how would you go about, talking about the themes or what they can expect, or just the series as a whole? And it can be this series for Ecopunk or any others if you have some that don't fit.
Sure. Well, the Biodome Chronicles, I wrote specifically for upper teens and college-age 20s because I wanted to present a different worldview. I wanted them to question the world around them and to decide their own opinion, their own truth at the end of the day. And so I have characters that are in that age bracket, and I wanted them to be very relatable. So so some people enjoy that. Some people are like, they're so teenage. It's like, yeah. But the story is about a young man. I'm going to back up. It's about how two worlds collide. When a young man from the near future is kind of called upon by these siblings inside an experimental medieval colony that's for Mars. It's a Mars prototype. And he is called upon to help solve a shocking death. And he ends up having to join this experimental colony in a way. And he discovers that it's really a psychological game of survival. So these people are completely codependent upon the land. They are the people in the medieval colony. I should back up a little bit, sorry. So the people in the medieval colony have been living in there for 20 years, sealed hermetically. They have no contact with the outside world. So the people who are born in there, they know that they're on Earth. They know that the atmosphere outside of their world is fine. They're not going to die if they walk out. They're allowed to leave at any time for any reason, but nobody does. Everybody stays inside this biodome. And this biodome's huge. I mean, it's several miles, all the way around. Several different biomes, so different tiny biodomes that connect to the main one with different benefits, like we need the rainforest for more oxygen, for medicine. We need the desert for our grapes so we can have our wine, because if you're going to be enclosed, you got to have wine. And better for growing grains. And so I looked at the different environments and how they benefited society. I really took an ethnobotany, ethnoscience perspective. I wanted to see how man interacted with their environment, regardless of what that environment was, like how they felt in it, how they explored it, how they used it. So they've been in there for 20 years. There's been a death, and it's suspected to be a murder. It's the first time they believe anybody has been murdered. And so then they contact the outside world, which is a near future cyberpunk world.
Oh, okay.
So then those two worlds, you've got machine and you've got nature. So you've got these people who spin their clothes. They spin the yarn. They grow their clothes from seed. They have no concept of factories. Everybody works. It's a commune. So there is no exchange of money. There is none of that. They only know natural medicine. So they're wholly dependent upon the land. And then all of a sudden they converge with this world of machines. And the irony is that it's a machine that's allowing them to be able to live in this bubble. Because the biome itself is a machine.
Yeah, that's an interesting theme, like an interesting tension.
Yes. Yep. So that's kind of the long and short about it.
That's perfect. Okay, and then any other series you want to tell us about?
I'm currently working on a 500-year spin-off of that series. Which is proving interesting, but I'm kind of taking instead of a more permaculture commune take on Ecopunk, I'm kind of looking at a more pagan take of Ecopunk. So I have this machine up in space that's been terraformed, and there are people who have been living on there. They were originally scientists, and it was for bioenvironmental warfare testing. So they had all these different biomes, and they would just...
So Storypunks, with that cliffhanger, if you have to break away and go do something else, we totally understand. But once again, the next installation of this interview is available for you right away. So you can check out episode 32 for our discussion about medieval, mythological, and pagan tie-ins. But before you do that, let me tell you about the Storypunks Salon and Reading Room, because Jesikah Sundin will be joining me for the first session. This is an online book club that I'm running through that forum. So if you're used to Facebook groups, that's what this is. You go to Storypunks on Facebook, and I think the official link is facebook.com/Storypunks. And then you can just click on groups. It's also in our promo picture, so you can just click join group, and it will ask if you want to join. So please do this just a little ahead of time, ahead of our scheduled Facebook Live session with Jesikah Sundin, where I'm talking about our first read, and that is The Wind-Up Girl. This is an Ecopunk classic by Paolo Bacigalupi. And if you need that spelled, I can do that for you. It's Bacigalupi. You can also go to my running list of audiobooks, and I link through there. So if you go to storypunks.world/audible, most of the reads on our book club list this year are audiobooks. There's one or two exceptions where they're just not available. So I've used other services as well, like audiobooks.com, or even looking through my library through Overdrive. That's an app that's used by many libraries if you're not familiar with it. But some of these are Audible exclusives. So if you're not an Audible user and you're interested in getting a discount or checking it out, then I have an offer for you. You can go to storypunks.world/audible, click that link, and you can try this as your free read or take a listen and then join us. So we're not doing a review. It's more like if you think of being in English class, having a critique in that way, but not really a critique so much as a salon discussion. So we might be bantering about different viewpoints, different interpretations that you can bring to reading a text. So if you're an English nerd, you loved that, or you aspire to be more nerdy about books in the punk realms, please join us. It's going to be such a good time. So again, it is Monday, April 22nd, 2019. That's Earth Day, so how appropriate, because this is an Ecopunk read. And it will be at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Mountain, and 6 p.m. Pacific. We would love that. There will be a place where you can chime in on the discussion. Of course, it is a book club, so I hope you will join and be crazy involved. That would be the coolest. And you can also go to facebook.com/groups/Storypunks to find us.